Look at the sprawl of Johannesburg. Skyscrapers, gold mines, power stations, and more than 5 million people forming the economic center of Africa. To keep a city of this size running requires billions of liters of water. Yet almost 2 out of every 3 glasses poured here do not originate in South Africa. They flow down from a separate, landlocked nation, a tiny mountain kingdom swallowed completely by South African territory, looking like a hole on the map. By normal logic, this enclave shouldn't exist. With no coastline, oil, or flat farmland, powerful neighbors would usually absorb it. This chart shows the elevation profile of the region. Notice how the border sharply rises. Lesotho is the only nation on Earth sitting entirely above 1,000 meters. Every road and village sits higher than the tallest hills in many surrounding countries. 2/3 of the terrain is jagged rock, snowing heavily in winter. This harsh topography is exactly how the nation survived, and eventually how it secured immense leverage over the continent's wealthiest economy. In the early 19th century, Southern Africa fractured. Waves of conflict scattered communities and erased old boundaries. A leader named Moshoeshoe I gathered these refugees and moved them up onto a flat-topped mountain stronghold. From that high ground, attackers had to climb, while defenders could see threats approaching for miles. Those threats arrived soon enough. Dutch-descended settlers, the Boers, steadily pushed into the region, seizing territory for farms and grazing land. Facing a slow defeat against a better armed force, Moshoeshoe made a calculated choice. He asked the British Empire for protection. The resulting 1868 treaty drew a hard, protected line on the map. That line froze the Boer advance and ensured the Basotho people would not be absorbed into the colonies that eventually formed modern South Africa. The significance of that border crystallized decades later. In 1948, the National Party took power next door and constructed the brutal legal machinery of apartheid. On one side of the mountains, millions were stripped of their rights and classified by the state. On the other side, within the high ground of the British protectorate, the Basotho avoided that system entirely. But political survival did not bring wealth. For decades, the independent kingdom relied heavily on its own people leaving the mountains to work in South African mines, sending their wages back home to sustain the local economy. When the mines began shedding jobs, those crucial remittances dropped. The nation needed a new source of income, something reliable that could not be cut off so easily by the giants surrounding them. The solution was falling from the sky. Rain and snow gather constantly in these high peaks, generating far more runoff than the small population can use. Below them, the South African highveld is mostly dry. Johannesburg grew entirely around veins of gold. The mines came first, the city followed, and industry expanded in a location without a major river or natural water source nearby. By the late 20th century, the factories and the growing population simply outpaced the local supply. The economic capital of Africa was running dry. To fix the deficit, the two governments signed a treaty in 1986. They agreed to build the Lesotho Highlands Water Project. Because Lesotho sits so high above its surroundings, the system requires no massive pumps to fight gravity. Water is dammed in the mountains, then channeled through tunnels bored straight into solid rock. Its own weight pulls it downhill, across the border, and directly into South African reservoirs. The scale of the capture is enormous. Dams like Katse hold back entire valleys, sending nearly 800 million cubic meters of water out of the country every year. This single system now supplies roughly 60. The original treaty was signed under a military government decades ago. The initial price was locked in for years, effectively turning Lesotho's rarest resource into a cheap subsidy for the wealthy South African economy. But the leverage is shifting. With a third Great Dam, Mohale, now under construction, the two nations are renegotiating the terms. The kingdom is learning to charge the true market value for the resource it controls. A nation that ordinary geopolitics suggests should have been absorbed long ago managed to stay independent through a brutal century simply by holding the highest ground. We usually measure international influence by looking at military budgets, massive populations, or sheer economic output. But a few hundred meters of elevation can quietly outweigh those advantages. The shape of the land dictates who depends on whom, giving the smallest player on the map a firm grip on the valve of an empire.